Previously on Adventures in Mass, we adventured over at drummerboypark. Here is a few clips of what you have missed. If you missed last week's episode, I do advise to rewind. But if not, no problems, because we're going to be back here this week. And this time we are accompanied by a gentleman named Michael. He is a historian, and he's going to tell us a bunch of stories and a bunch of history behind of all the attractions here at drummerboypark. That would be the blacksmith house, that would be the Harris Black house, that would also be the windmill. So stay tuned, because Adventures in Mass begins now. It's pretty cool. There's no light up there. Still pretty cool. Oh boy. Wow. Hello.
Where are you?
I'm upstairs.
Oh, that's I'm not supposed to be.
Oh, I'm not supposed to be here?
Oh, here. Yeah,
Yeah,
but not
I'm
up
just
there.
putting my camera up.
That's
all right.
fine. Yeah, the reason being there's no railing.
That's what I kind of figured.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
this mill was the earliest we have it in town records is 1795.
Is it okay if I put you on camera?
Say again?
Is it okay if I put you on camera?
Oh, I suppose.
Okay.
The earliest record we have on the mill here in town is 1795. It was probably built before then. And oddly enough, most of the heavy timbers are not from Cape Cod. By the time 1795 came around, we'd been on Cape 150 years, and we'd cut down every tree of any substantial girth.
Wow.
So the other part of Massachusetts, which we know is Maine today, it was pre-cut and then shipped down by packet boat and then assembled here. The mill originally was at the other end of town on Ellis Landing, and they put it up on the King's Highway. The only problem was that when this thing turns, when it moves, it creaks and all kinds of movements, and it really disturbed the horses. So they had to jack it up, put it on rollers, and move it down about 100 yards down on Ellis Landing. That's where it was for almost 200 years.
Wow.
So they moved it here in 1970. It was donated by Francis Nickerson. So a mill like this has two parts. You've got the tower,
Yeah.
and then you've got the boat top. There's no rollers, there's no bearings. This is pure friction. So what they used to do, if you notice up there, the dark stains on the wood, that's tallow, that's animal fat. That's what greased it. And the English phrase, put your shoulder to the wheel, which we mean let's get to work.
Yeah.
Well, the wheel's out back. The first thing the miller did when he got here in the morning was turn the boat top out of the wind so he could climb up on the vanes to set the sails.
Wow.
And then to get it to work, he would turn it back into the wind, not necessarily full on, and depending upon what kind of power he needed. So, and this thing works the best between, say, around 20 miles an hour, give or take.
Oh, wow.
That's the wind speed. If you start pushing the high 20s, you're going to talk about a runaway mill, which could cause considerable damage. And, below 10 miles an hour, it just isn't worth
Working it.
No, because there's just not enough effort force to turn the wheel. So, the clamp around the drive wheel up there
Yeah.
is a braking system. So once he set the vanes into the wind, you see a
Okay.
counterbalance over there,
Yeah.
and he would release that. It would open the clamp, and then the wind would then turn the main drive shaft up there, and then the wallow gear, this mechanism here,
Yeah.
changes the direction of the force. The wind comes down here. You got two stones here. The bottom stone does not move. The top stone is the turn stone. And what they do is they put, a bushel is about 50 to 60 pounds. Sometimes they use about a sack, 80-pound sack. And it will do about 60 pounds in 12 minutes on an average speed.
Wow.
And then he could control the feed through a rope down below. He could pull that back and forth, and that would feed it into the eye, and its centrifugal force would send it out. And if you can see the grooves
Oh, yeah.
in that stone, okay,
Yeah.
it has a shearing. It's not really grinding like in a mortar and pestle. It's a shearing thing, and it has to be sharpened about every 200 to 400 hours of operation. It needs to be sharpened.
So they basically cut more grooves into it to sharpen it up.
Well, yes. A millwright, or if a miller knew what he was doing, what he'd have to do is this mechanism here. You don't have to pull it very high. So this, basically, there's an iron bar that goes in here. You swing it over by the stone, the turnstone up here, and it goes into a hole. And then just simple, mechanics, basic, simple machine. You could raise it an inch or so. We take the floor up. There's a trap door there.
Oh.
And then we would simply invert the stone, put it on blocks, and then it could be worked on. Sometimes it took 30 to 40 hours to redo that that stone. And every morning, of course, he'd have to raise the stone, get it underneath there with a broom, and make sure it was clear and clean. We have a few phrases in our language that come from the mill. Like, for instance, put your nose to the grindstone.
Okay.
If the grindstone is going too fast, or if it's too close,
It's going to be heated.
Yeah, and you're going to smell burning. So every now and then, he literally goes down, puts his nose to the grindstone to see if he can smell anything burning. And if so, well, it's either moving too fast or it needs to be raised. Right. So the other thing, another word that pops up to my mind is rule of thumb. Now you come in and you ask the miller to do a fine or a coarser grind. Well, what rule does he go by? Well, he just simply picks it up and puts it between his fingers and his thumb. And rule of thumb, it's going to vary from mill to mill and miller to miller, but you sort of get the idea. So
Now, so I take it that they were grinding corn?
yeah.
Is that what this mill was all about?
This is not a commercial mill. This is a village. This is a neighborhood mill.
Right, back in the day.
Back in the day, you needed three things for a good old New England village. Pastor for your church, a smith for the blacksmith shop, and you needed a miller. To get a miller, towns were willing to forego taxes.
Okay.
He was exempt from serving in the military, and oftentimes the town would give him property to build a house on, have a small farm. In addition to that, in Puritan New England, which was an exception, when the wind came, the wind came. So if it came on a Sunday, he got to work rather than spend 7 hours in church.
Oh.
So, and the term first come, first serve. Well, this mill did not run every day because he had other things to do to support himself. So you would simply bring your sack over, your bushel, line it up, he'd number it. First one to come in got the grain done. So that's where we get first come, first serve. That comes out of the mill too. So there's enough. This'll last for a long time. But once it's been ground, there's enough residual oil in here that within 2 weeks the flour will go sour.
Oh.
So Mom gets this stuff back to the house and she starts baking pretty quick. Making breads, muffins, whatever she's going to use it for. And then, of course, you got to fight the vermin, make sure they don't get it either.
Yeah.
So,
And they probably sold quite a bit of it to make some profit too.
well, he got a cut. One way there's a scoop down in the storage bin down below, and he usually got 2 quarts out of a bushel. That was his cut, and he could trade it. He could sell it, or he could eat it. In the early part of our history, there wasn't much hard cash.
Right. It was mostly trading goods for
barter,
goods.
Bartering. If it wasn't goods, it was even labor.
Oh.
So that come harvest time, if you owed somebody something, and let's say they had an orchard, well, you would give him time and trade for apples, whatever it might be. That's the way things were done. Any other question?
I think that's about it. I'm Tony.
Anthony. Michael.
Nice to meet you, Michael.
Yeah. So the house in the back, over there, the black house, is an interesting building. It is a typical working man's house. It's one of the last ones left on the Cape. 16 by 16, and over the years in that family, there were 9 children and the parents inhabiting that little house.
Wow.
You have a keeping room on the first floor, a loft, you can't go up to it, but it's just a loft, an attic loft, low loft, and the kids would sleep up there on mats.
Oh wow! So the loft was their bedroom.
Yeah, all of them.
That's pretty
So,
cool.
You figure you had kids. Well, The oldest might be 14, the youngest might be 2. So the youngest boy, 12, 14 years old, he's either apprenticed off or goes to sea, leaves another bed empty. And young ladies were, by 15 years old, you were looking for a husband. If you were 18 during the colonial period, you were an old maid.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's just the way things were. So, one of the biggest causes of death for women in the colonial period, of course, was childbirth. And the other being the hearth. They have layers and layers of petticoats and aprons and whatnot.
Oh.
And all you need is one little cinder, a spark. And she
That's
might have her back turned, and before you know it, she's on fire. So, that was hazardous duty. I mean, and she was in front of that hearth 5-6 hours a day, considering she had to cook 3 meals and do preparations.
So if there
and
was
make bread
loss.
and whatnot. And then she had to take care of the kitchen garden. Have to spin. You have to weave. One colonial shirt, a woolen shirt, took on the average of 3 months to make.
Wow.
Contained, the thread was almost 5 miles long if you extended the thread out. So that shirt went through many children and probably off to some cousins and whatnot. Served many different purposes. And all of the clothing, when you go over there, you'll see a chest. All of the family clothing was in that box. If a person had 2-3 sets of clothing, it was, for the average working Joe, that was about right.
Wow.
Yeah. What you see in the Patriot isn't exactly what's really true.
Now, is this cloth?
No, that was just something there to keep people from banging their heads.
Oh.
That's all. Yeah. This is a knee. The bent, even colonial ships would have this, so that you'd have the deck, large beams up here supported by a beam, which is a knee. It's a part of the tree that was chosen and cut that way, grown that way. In colonial New England or colonial America, each town had its tree wardens. And we still do. But back then, if a tree was labeled a king's tree, you couldn't touch it because they were favored for shipbuilding, especially for the Royal Navy. And if you got caught cutting one down, I'm not sure exactly what the penalty was, but they used to hang people for stealing a loaf of bread.
That's pretty bad. On March 3rd in 1820, it was officially signed for Maine to become its own state and has separated from the state of Massachusetts. That was the date that Massachusetts no longer had. So in this portion of the video, we're going to be hearing Michael tell us a bunch of historical facts as well as some really interesting stories. So kick back, relax, and enjoy our little tour of the blacksmith shop right here.
It was so, we're still working on it. It's a job in progress.
Oh, God.
So
now, do you do any of the blacksmith?
I am not a blacksmith.
Okay.
I'm an ex-teacher who can talk forever.
Where did you teach?
I taught back in Connecticut
Okay.
in elementary.
Whereabouts?
Mostly Enfield.
Enfield.
Enfield?
Okay.
Yeah, mostly 6th grade, except.
Make a plan, JP High School, 5 years.
Yeah.
Well, I did high school 1 year.
I did
Yeah.
high school, but I did the social.
So when this was rebuilt, was it rebuilt with
This building was moved, taken apart and moved.
okay.
All of these buildings are original. And then they moved up into Massachusetts, and eventually they had a problem getting along with their neighbors a lot. And they finally moved up into that New York section, and they started their own little colony. So the Allens, when the colony in New York sent a couple of sheriffs up to see what was going on and tell them, we don't know what you think you're doing, but this is New York. This is not Massachusetts. It's not Connecticut. So either, follow New York or get out. Well, the Allens knew that they were coming, so they took the two sheriffs, put one in one end of the house, and another one on the other end of the house, held them for a couple of days as prisoners. Then they took the clothes off of one guy and made a dummy, put him outside the window on the other end of the house so the other sheriff could see what was going on. Then they shot him. It was a dummy.
Oh.
So they allowed the other guy to escape. So he would run off, and he did the same thing to the other guy.
Oh, they were so
So, it's an interesting little anecdote to American history. So it's just like Paul Revere.
Yeah.
There's only one reason why he's really famous is because of a poem. And it's kind of ironic. Paul Revere went north during the Revolution. The British had landed a Scottish regiment up in Penobscot Bay. So Massachusetts sent 2,000 infantry and 21 ships up there to kick them out.
Blacksmith's place in there.
And 800 Scotsmen and 3 schooners defeated the whole Massachusetts Army and Navy. Not one ship came back. The army dissolved into the woods. They lost everything. And during that,
I don't know.
Paul Revere was brought up on 14 charges. Dereliction of duty, cowardice, failure to follow orders under fire, etc. And misuse of Commonwealth funds. 14 charges. They finally get him back to Boston. They put him he's under court-martial and being held in his own house for 3 months under house arrest. Finally gets into court. They start the court-martial in the morning, read the charges, and the officer in charge of the court-martial, who is a friend of Mr. Revere, adjourns for lunch.
And that was it.
That was it.
That was it, huh?
Yeah. Now it's ironic in that the poem that was written for the centennial was written by the grandson of the general who brought the charges against Paul Revere. Longfellow.
It's a small world, isn't it?
So, you take, it's part of our history, it's part of our culture. You take everything with a grain of salt. I always told my students, make sure you get 3 independent sources. And ask yourself, does this make sense? Evaluate, don't rush to a decision. Think about it. It's the way it should be. Just don't take everything at face value.
So, how did Maine actually become Maine when they broke apart from Mass?
There was a compromise, and I can't remember all of the details, but Massachusetts agreed to let Maine go and form its own colony. I can't remember. I don't remember. Don't have an answer for you on that one. I'm not afraid to say that.
I never even knew Maine was part of Mass.
So Barbara, explain this.
Sussex.
Yeah, that's
Most of the people who the early Puritans who came here came from southwest England.
Oh, that's where my husband's family's from.
Yeah. My wife's family too, Sussex.
Okay.
Now you can't afford a house there.
That's right.
I guess it's from one of the English tourists said that it's a bedroom town for London. And so, it's very expensive living in Sussex now.
That's something that's changed.
Nobody will say anything about it.
Right.
Say again?
I said, you can
This is
talk
amazing.
forever
I
and
can't
nobody
wait
will
to
say
take
anything.
this
We're
back.
glad you
Yeah.
did.
Well, I don't mind if people. When the kids had a question in school, and I didn't know the answer, I would just say, I don't know
I
that.
think that's the best.
Yeah.
I don't know
the
that.
best
And
thing
then
to
I'd
do.
Honesty is
send
the
them
best
down
I
to
don't
policy.
want to make it up. I think
and then
it's
send them
about
down
it.
to the library. Go find out. And when you get the answer, let me know. There is an interesting author who lives right here in Chatham. His name is Bernard Cornwell. And the incident about Revere, he wrote a book about, it's called The Fort, F-O-R-T. Excellent book, 95% historically correct. It's a great book. You know, it's part novel and
This
part
area.
history book.
It's about this area.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then
it's really interesting.
the other thing that people misunderstand is that Cape Cod, for the most part, when it, you know, we had already worn out the soil. We've been here for 150 years. Very poor farming methods that we brought over from England and whatnot forced people into fishing and going to sea and all that sort of thing. And people around here were not wealthy at all. Some were downright destitute. It's an interesting mix,
Yeah.
you know. Interesting.
Well, it's interesting. But
So-
thank you.
Good to get a chat.
I
What
appreciate
tools
it.
do they make here?
Say again?
What tools do they make? Do they make tools and weapons here?
Tools?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, tools. Well, whatever you'd need, anything from a draw blade, an axe, a boarding axe, you know, to split planks, hammers, things for the kitchen. For instance, a sieve or a spatula, frying pan, you know, that sort of thing. If there were other craftsmen who would be more fine, you'd go to a tinsmith later on. They had tinsmiths who would make cups and plates and containers and whatnot. You had people who worked with pewter. You know, pewter having a heavy lead content. If it got too hot, the lead would leach into the food, so you have to be considerate of that. To this day, my wife will not let me use a pewter cup. I belong to the local colonial militia,
Oh,
and we
okay.
try to be authentic. She said, "Don't drink out of that." Okay, yes, dear.
Very good. You're an obedient husband.
Say again?
You're an obedient husband.
I try to be, or let's put it this way, I get away with what I can.
It's
more like it.
It's not as heavy as that one.
I don't know. I don't know. Oh, I'm glad I got this. This is a surprise.
There are some more pamphlets as you go.
Okay, good. Thank you.
At
Okay.
the same time.
Yes, I don't know. Are these here too?
Oops, sorry.
But it doesn't have my name on it. It's funny to see, my kids will be excited. Okay, good. Thank you so much. Nice meeting you.
Welcome.
Yeah,
Now
yeah,
we can
yeah.
get back there and look at the blacksmith
In my
thing.
hometown.
Right.
This is my
So if you're enjoying this video, be sure to hit that like button and share this video with all your family and friends. And also, if you're new to this channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And don't forget that bell. As long as you hit that bell and subscribe button, whenever I put out a brand new video, you will be able to get that new video as it is coming out. So, as always, this is your pal Tony here. And I'm going to continue on with this video and audio right now as we continue at our drummerboypark.
Okay. I look at these and I take it for granted, but once upon a time, and not too long ago, say 30 years ago, I used to go fishing with my father-in-law. He had a fishing boat. We'd go jigging for cod and hauling it one up. And this is what we would load the fish in. These are fish boxes. And standard load was about 125 pounds a box. Now everything's in plastic,
Oh, yeah.
you know?
Right,
So,
yeah, a lot easier to carry.
say again?
A lot easier to carry.
Well, you
That
know,
box is heavy.
you had a hook.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, you drag it on the ground. It wasn't so bad. You try not to pick it up.
Okay, thanks again.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
The steps here.
What I've been doing, while I've been retired, well, I know. I've been the past number of years, I have a daily journal, so I've been writing things down in that. And then my, let me walk this way. Is that yours?
That's mine, but I'll
Somebody
take it out.
behind you. My daughter gave me a book that she bought at a store called The Legacy, and it's about maybe 150 pages long, and it asks questions about what was it like when you were,
Yeah.
and how did you
Nice
do
idea.
this?
Nice idea.
It is. So I've been writing in that book and books like it, and I read a quote, and I think it's very pertinent these days. When an old person dies, a library burns.
Yeah.
You know, I've been trying to.
That neat stuff.
Hmm?
Wonderful to know something.
That's well, you know, you try and pass it on, but the kids are so busy they don't have time to listen. Although the older grandsons, they're good, and now suddenly, the ones who are 16 and 18 years old, they're starting to ask questions.
Yeah.
You know, the little ones are too busy.
But the information you have is so rich. And you can't find it.
Well, you know, they'll compile their own.
Huh?
They'll compile their own.
Oh, yeah, but
Well, you know, the other thing is, if you remember how we used to sit down at
there's a set of elbows.
Oh,
we
wow.
did it for 2-3 hours, right? And we'd have, at the end, you had some nuts and some grapes and a little wine, and it would just drag on, and you,
Nice.
stop.
That's what you're getting all into. It's
But the
beautiful
kids
stuff.
don't do this anymore. They sit down, and ding, 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 7 minutes. Dinner's done. It should have taken 3 hours. You know? Oh.
When I come back, I expect to see a soft book. Not a hard lark.